For a hand scratching my scalp and for a kiss against my forehead. By Weird_O. Chapter 4. Or it will hit you hard in the face. Trigger warnings. Child abuse, physical child abuse. When he arrived in the labs this one Friday, Mr. Stark looked stiffly. Peter could hear the man's heart beating a bit quicker than it usually did, and his breath was getting stuck in the back of his throat. Before Mr. Stark forced it out of his mouth in sighs, again and again. He had a deep frown sewn on his face, and for a second Peter almost felt like he should be there. That whatever Mr. Stark was upset about was going to blow full force at his face the second he tried to talk to the man. Peter knew it was a trauma response, that the man wouldn't do that, probably, and that Peter was just internalized the fact that people poured their anger out on him until they felt better. That wasn't going to happen, but he was still uncomfortable. Very much so. Hearing him arrive, Mr. Stark startled, flinching up, rising from his chair, eyes fixed on Peter, who felt like a deer in front of the headlight under the man's gaze. A wave of realization washed over Mr. Stark's face as he recognized Peter. He settled down in his chair, an apologetic, tired smile on his lips. "Sorry, Pete." Nickname, Peter thought, his body straightening up. That was new. "I didn't mean to jump like that. I was just caught up in my brain." "Nah, my fault. I forgot old Pete'll have trouble hearing." That dragged a snort out of Mr. Stark's. A clever smile spreading over his lips, and Peter felt like he had been upgraded. Okay, sarcasm was allowed. His heart swelled a little as he smiled back at the man. He wished he could have that kind of interaction with his father, too. "Aren't you just so dreamy? Come on, kid. Help me instead of getting all sassy." The man closed the hologram that was deployed in front of him when Peter walked in. Missing children. Peter had just time to read it before the projection disappeared in one of Friday's countless databases. Yeah, no wonder why Mr. Stark was in such a bad mood. Peter's stomach was suddenly tight with empathy and worry. He didn't know those children and probably never would, and yet Peter bit his lip, chewing on the skin lightly. What could he do? There was surely something he could do to find these kids. For Mr. Stark to feel a bit better. "Kid?" "I don't want you to feel bad," he blurted out, hands deep into his pocket, looking down at the gray of his half-used shoes. Mr. Stark was silent for a second, and Peter knew he had messed up. "You saw. It wasn't a question." "Sorry." The billionaire sighed at his word. "There's something I can do, right? Nothing. But we could find flyers, print them off. I could put them in the homeless shelters of Queens, or give them at school. Ask anyone if seen them. Peter continued, throwing up his words. Kid, breathe for a second. You're going to turn blue." Peter's mouth clapped shut. "Thank you very much," Mr. Stark said, a small, amused smile on his lips. Peter's ears were burning. "Thank you for wanting to help, even you weren't supposed to see that. I'm going to tell you what it is, because I got the feeling that if I don't, you will find a way to get involved anyway. But please, don't try to do anything stupid." Peter thought it was funny. The man barely knew him, and he barely knew the man, but he could tell more things about Peter than his father ever could, and Peter could tell more things about the man than he could ever about his father. "Those children are mutants." Peter's jaw clenched. So did his fists, understanding washing over him. It wasn't a kidnapping. It was hate crimes. "I can't tell you much more. Classified and shit, but I trust you perfectly understand what is going on," Mr. Stark said, looking at him from the corner of his eyes, acting like he was searching for a file in his computer. Peter knew he wasn't. The man was watching him, careful like a hawk, craving for his reaction. Not everybody liked mutants. Peter had seen the burning hate people had for mutants. He lived with his father, after all. His shoulder relaxed in abandon, and his eyes fell shut. He took a deep breath, oxygen burning in his lungs as he shook his head left to right, mostly for himself, trying to push the dehumanizing words of his father always shouted away. Mr. Stark's eyes left his face, looking at the desk underneath his fingertips. "I thought," the man started, his voice tentling weirdly. "I thought the whole Avengers thing had changed minds," he said, running his hands over his face, and Peter knew this was Mr. Stark being vulnerable to Peter. The teen closed his eyes, selfishly craving this moment in his brain. "You have, Mr. Stark. I've seen it," he whispered. Mutant people are being handled differently now because people have seen how good they could be, what greatness their gifts could do if people are treated like people instead of monsters, and that in spite of none of the Avengers actually being mutants. He stopped, eyes on Mr. Stark, careful, unsure if he was talking doing the right thing the right way. But there are always things you can't change. People you can't change. Peter had tried. He had tried so hard to change his father. There will be assholes everywhere here to ruin everything. Sometimes they are just annoying pricks. But sometimes they do actual damage, and we have to fix it for them because it's the best we can do. Mr. Stark was not looking at him, and Peter felt the biggest bitch in the universe. Who was he to give life lesson to Avengers? We can't change everybody. A small laugh escaped Mr. Stark's throat, pressed unhappily. He rolled his hand over his face, massaging his temples. "Getting scolded by a teenager," he whispered, grabbing a bottle of water. Peter frowned. "I wasn't scolding you, I know, kid. I'm messing with you." He took a small sip from his water before sighing. "Just trying to digest the fact that you are right, and it annoys me very much." Peter clenched his lips. "I'm serious, Mrs. Stark." "I know you are, Pete." "Oh, nickname again." "I am conscious of what you are telling me. Honestly, I was just being a self-centered, whiny billionaire for a second. Imagine being like that." Peter snorted. "But it doesn't change anything at the fact that we can't find them. Okay, we have changed people, whatever. Some kinds are still dying out there," he said, and Peter whined quietly. The man sighed, running his hand over his face again. He was doing that a lot when he was upset now, and that Peter was thinking about it. "Sorry, kid," Mr. Stark said, walking towards Peter. "Shouldn't be talking about death." He patted his shoulder lightly, and Peter wanted to work today. "Let's do something else." Peter's eyebrows shot up, and his mouth crooked lightly into a smile. They wouldn't be working, but Mr. Stark wasn't sending him back to his house. They were going to hang out? "Ice cream?" the man proposed, pushing tinted sunglasses on his nose. "It's November, Mr. Stark. And? Never had a winter ice cream?" The man smiled from above his shoulder. "Now come on, Pete. I'm not waiting for you." "Oh, nickname again." Peter accepted with a smile, running after the man. Mrs. Stark had given him homework last week. Well, not really homework, if Peter told the truth, but the man had given him documents. Delicate, classified documents, all gathered in a small black USB drive, the word Stark written in gold letters on the top. Mr. Stark had told him he would love to hear what the teen thought about it, so it was homework. Peter wouldn't be surprised if the man was just trying to pick his brain around and didn't actually care about what Peter had to say about his programs. But it was nice to pretend. He had spent all his week and all his weekend on it, barely remembering to do his actual homework. Peter clenched the USB drive in his hand, standing in front of his open locker. In his backpack, he had a file of 12 pages about what he understood of the complicated program that was written on the USB drive. It was the code of an AI. By the look of it, one of the first versions on Friday. Her code was a bit messy. Some important commands were missing. Peter had tried to complete the empty spots with his own codes. He hoped Mr. Stark wouldn't be mad. She was far from how effective she was now. But still, it was Friday. Peter thought it was weird that Mr. Stark had given him such precious data, but he wasn't complaining. He liked that. He liked the warmth it was spreading through his chest every time he remembered that Mr. Stark trusted him enough to handle one of his best creations. It was scary, all those trusting games, but Peter was closing his eyes and jumping head first into the comfort of the billionaire was offering him. A hand hit the back of his head with force, pushing his face into the hard metal of his open locker. His jaw made contact with the metal first, the corner of his locker door tracing immediately a long, red, angry cut from his jaw to the bottom of his cheekbone. His bone hit hard against the locker, making him hiss in pain. Peter noticed that the first floor of the tower was more quiet today. There was barely anyone, and the security guards were almost the only ones left, except for a young woman behind a huge desk at the entrance, typing furiously on her computer. Peter didn't think much of it. If anything, he was grateful that the tower was even more quiet than usual. He slipped into the elevator, looking at the huge mirrors sealed to the walls. His jaw was a bit bruised by now, but pretty colors forming around the cut. It wasn't too deep, and he would probably be healed by the time he got out of the tower. Good. He really didn't want to deal with the questions his parents would have asked. He stepped into the lab, posing his bag on the desk, searching for his work. Choked laughter echoed behind him, and when he turned, he could see a group of students, not even trying to contain their laugh, as they walked away. The other students present in the hallway looked concerned, frowning pouts on their faces, eyes on Peter or on Flash, who was walking away from him, laughing loudly with his friends, but nobody said a thing. Peter frowned, face wrinkling. He could taste blood in his mouth. He sighed, closing his locker. He was all right, and this wasn't going to ruin his day. He was going to the Stark Tower to show Mr. Stark what he had done. Nothing could ruin his day. He closed his locker with a sigh. He was done with his class anyway. Pain was tingling with him in a familiar way when he walked out of the school. It would heal quickly. His jaw was not broken. He highly doubted that Flash had enough strength to break his bones, but it was aching and he felt a bit like crying. Eyes wet, he was quite on his way to the Stark Tower. He had forgotten his headphones. A father and his young son passed next to him, their hands entangled together. Peter looked away, biting the inside of his mouth, the side that ached. "Hey, Peter," Mr. Stark called. "Hi, Mr. Stark," he called back, raising his head, eyes disappearing into a smile. His jaw was aching. "What happened to your face?" Mr. Stark's voice was weird, and Peter couldn't read correctly. He opened his eyes. The man's face was neutral, and Peter didn't know what to think as he studied the billionaire silently for a minute. "It wasn't your parents, was it?" The man tried again, after the silence stretched for too long, hesitating lightly this time, and oh. Dread washed over Peter like a cold shower, almost feeling like his hair was now all wet and cold, his clothes soaking from the man's tentative question. He could feel his face fall as he looked at the man, eyes so wide he was scared for a second that Mr. Stark might notice the wetness that was forming underneath his thick lashes. The question felt unreal because nobody asks that in real life. Not to Peter, at least. It felt weird having someone else they knew, an adult, thinking that maybe your parents weren't very good parents. Peter wondered what had given it away. Was it the way he always kept 6 fits between him and Mr. Stark, or just for security, or how he smiled, uncomfortable with his siblings or parents were brought up in the conversation? Or maybe Mr. Stark had understood even before, maybe the first time he saw him, how his father's hand had clenched too tight around his shoulder, how his mother had said that she was surprised that her son's intelligence had picked up someone's interest. He didn't think it had been obvious. He had been wrong. He thought as he looked away from his mentor. No, of course not. It wasn't them. Don't worry, Mr. Stark, Peter said, voice a bit quiet, taking out his bag with the folder in with his work of the week. Who them? The man asked, voice a bit stern, as if he didn't believe him, which probably was the case. Grabbing a first aid kit from underneath his desk, and Peter winced a little, hands clenching around his folder. It's nothing, Mr. Stark, the man snorted dryly, opening the kit, selecting compress and a disinfectant. Sure, someone beat off my intern enough that he shows up with a rainbow on his face, but I'm not allowed to know or do anything about it. Come here, kid, he signaled, rolling a chair in front of him. Peter obligated in silence, sitting in front of the man, looking up at him when the billionaire poured the lotion on the compress. I can help you if you ask me, Pete, Mr. Stark said, and Peter somewhere felt like the man was talking about something more than his bruise. His fingers grabbed Peter's jaw, gently dragging the wet tissue on his cut. Peter leaned into the touch. Just for a while, he told himself. I'm okay, Mr. Stark, he said, from the tip of his lips. I can handle myself. The man hummed lightly, getting a bit of dried blood off his cheek with the compress. I don't doubt it. I know you can. It doesn't mean you have to, he said, almost with a sigh. Believe me when I tell you that things are always so much easier when you have someone. I have friends, Peter scolded, and Mr. Stark laughed. Yeah, kid, yeah, but you understand what I mean. I haven't known you for very long, but I think we both understand each other well enough. We are sadly similar, and you and I, if you hadn't noticed, he said. Peter swallowed with difficulty. He was really unsure how to answer that, a little startled. We work the same way, our brains, I mean. Mr. Stark wasn't looking at him, pulling another compress out of the kit, trying very hard to clean the dried blood on Peter's cheek without hurting him. I don't want you to make the same mistakes as me, kid. Don't push people away because you are sad, the billionaire said, raising his eyes strangely gentle and honest in a way that made Peter blink in surprise. If there were paparazzi here, they would have torn each other apart to capture a picture of the man's face, how sincere he looked. But they weren't here. No, this was just for Peter. His eyes were aching, wet, fat tears forming behind his lashes. God, he hated serious talks. He hated vulnerability. Peter started, voice cracking despite himself. I really don't mean to, he whispered. It's just so much. I don't want to lose anybody, but I can't. Yeah, he couldn't, because he was Spider-Man, and he couldn't tell people because he was so disgusted by his parents that he just wished he'd never have to face them again, because he barely had said a word to his siblings over the last years, because he was too tired to keep up with his friends. Oh, he really wanted so badly to have a close relationship. He always dreamt about light touches, a hug, and a hand ruffling his hair, a whisper, I love you, kid, I love you, Peter, before going to bed. It was always in the back of his head, but he couldn't have that. He knew it didn't work outside of his head, because he was too rough and too rude. He pushed people away by being quiet, by wanting to do everything by himself, because he could do it. He could handle everything alone, despite the burning craving in his chest for intimacy and comfort. Vulnerability is key to closeness, one said, but Peter couldn't handle such a thing. All he wished for was to be held and for someone in return, and oh, he was crying fat, ugly tears on his bruise. He really made a mess of himself in front of Mr. Stark. Peter hiccuped quietly, biting his bottom lip in mortification. "All right, come here," the man whispered, compressed long abandoned on his desk, his callous hand rolling on Peter's cheeks, drying away his tears away. He opened his arms, and Peter got up, letting the man hold him tight, his hand stroking the back of his head slowly. God, he was stupid, Peter thought, face buried in the man's shoulder. He was 16, being comforted like a little kid. When was the last time someone held him like that? He didn't know. A choked sob passed his lips. Peter was ashamed. Truly, he was always ashamed. It would be from the way he walked, from the way his face twisted when he talked, or from something embarrassing he said years ago. Peter was constantly ashamed. He sighed, running his hands on his face, pitching the top of his nose, massaging his eyes. Who knows? Maybe it would make the embarrassment go away. His eyes were still aching, dry from the night before. He had ended up crying for a very long time. Mr. Stark must have taken pity on him because he had proposed he stay at the tower for the night, so he didn't have to go all the way back to Queens. He could stay at the penthouse in the guest room or at one of the flats on the 90th floor, Mr. Stark had said. His parents had said no. Miserable, he had been silent in the back of Mr. Stark's security guard's car, eyes red and puffy, face bruised, sniffing quietly. The guards kept sending him curious glances, his blue eyes reflecting on Peter's from the car's mirror, but the teen hadn't cared. He would have never seen the security guard again, and if he did, Peter wouldn't recognize him. Well, he had been too busy sobbing himself away to pay attention to the man. No. This was all right. Peter's cheeks were a bit warm every time he thought back at the curious glance of the security guards, but it was all right. What Peter was really embarrassed about was how his thoughts drifted back to the comfort of being held every time he closed his eyes. How he focused on the way Mr. Stark had oh so gently stroked the back of his head in a way his father never did. He didn't want to go home. He didn't want to see his father. He just wanted to stay with Mrs. Stark a little bit longer. And see, Peter wasn't stupid. He knew what was happening. He was so touch-starved. He was seeking comfort so much that he couldn't get out of his mind the fact that Mr. Stark had held him and comforted him. It was becoming borderline obsessive. Peter could count on the fingers on his hand the number of times someone had comforted him in that way. He had held him until his sobs had died. It was so stupid to be uncomfortable with his father, wrapping him into a hug and squeezing him like he was a little kid. But craving it with Mrs. Stark? He winced, his head falling on his desk, hidden behind his arms. Flash laughed behind him, and Peter's cheeks burned. Right, he couldn't exist in peace if Flash was around. "You all right, man?" Ned asked next to him. Peter knew the boy had been eyeing the almost faded bruise on his cheek since he greeted him this morning and was waiting for the moment they would sneak behind the school in the afternoon to ask him about it. Yep, Peter said, breathing his words. Ned snorted, unhappy, and MJ gave him a discreet side-eye, judgment on her face. "No, you're not," Ned said, and Peter sighed. No, he was not. "You didn't even talk to us anymore, actually." Peter clenched his lips, guilty, uncomfortable in his skin. "Ned," MJ warned him. Peter was hiding behind his arms, face against the lukewarm wood of his desk. He wished he was somewhere else. He didn't want to be put in front of his mistakes. "Like, man, I've barely heard about you for like a month. You don't even come with us behind the school anymore. You don't answer our texts." Ned continued, with a bit of accusation in his words. Peter rubbed his hands on his face, sitting up, straightening his back. See, he had really tried to keep up with his friends when he first became Spider-Man. It had been draining. His uncle had just died, and then a girl he tried to save had died. And then his father became even worse than he used to be, and his mother told him that seeing a therapist was bad for him, that he shouldn't get used to being vulnerable in front of people. Yes, she had said that. Peter was still stunned. But he had his friends, and he had told them everything, mostly. He hadn't told them how his father had grabbed the collar of his brother's shirt and had torn the fabric apart because his mother had tried running away from the man during an argument. He hadn't told them about how even doing homework always ended in insults, doors locked, and walls shaking from his father trying to knock doors down. He hadn't told them how when they would misbehave as kids, and he and his siblings would get locked up in a dark closet for hours. But now he was just so tired and so convinced that he didn't need anyone to keep on going. He didn't feel like he belonged with them anymore, which was stupid because God, he loved Ned and MJ with all his heart, and he loved being with them. He just didn't know why he was pushing them away, why he was anxious before every hangout, why he thought of staying in bed was more appealing than going out and laughing around his friends, why talking feelings with them felt sickening. "Have busy internship?" He tried, voice a bit weak. "Dude, it's like once a week on Friday. We never hang out on Friday." I know, I'm sorry," Peter whispered quickly, not looking at his friends, his head in his hands. "Look, I'm really sorry, okay?" he said, voice half stuck in his mouth, hands leaving his face. Why was it so difficult to talk? "I don't know what's up with me, all right? I will be better, all right? I will fix it." He knew what was up with him, but he didn't know if he could fix it. MJ's face softened a little. "We don't want you to be better. We want you to be okay, which you are not." Peter opened his mouth to talk, but MJ did not let him. "We can help you with that. We may be not much. We are not therapists, but we are your friends. Don't push us away." Peter's mouth clapped shut. He hated how everyone could see through him. He understood that Mr. Stark did. The man had lived through something similar. Peter believed that he had gone through the same process of loneliness and self-isolation the teen had for the last 2 months and for years. Mr. Stark had spent years closed off on himself, but his friends shouldn't. Maybe they didn't. Maybe MJ was just observant enough to see him drifting away, and Ned was just so used to having him next to him that he could feel the cold spot Peter was leaving every time he tried to walk away. They probably didn't understand why he did it, but they noticed. Peter felt grateful and guilty. He bit his lips, looking up at his friends, shaking his head from left to right. "I wasn't trying to. It just happened." He looked back at his hands. "Sorry." "You're all right," MJ said, bumping her fists against his shoulder lightly. "Don't do it again, though." Peter was sorry. He really was, but he couldn't help it. "For real, dude, I'm gonna get so many Lego sets for Christmas. At least wait until we are done building them to ditch us," Ned joked. Peter smiled weakly, guilty. and MJ rolled her eyes fondly. Sorry, Ned, I won't do it again. He hoped he could keep that promise.